Hi, Ray. Good
Hello, Sarah. How
afternoon.
you doing?
Good. All right. So let's see. Okay. Oh, we are we are full screen. Okay. All right. So I'm so glad that we get on again today. And hello, everyone. Thank you for watching. And my name is Sarah M. And I have with me 10 times author of book. Uh, they make America great. That is his newest book, latest book, the number 10. And I'm Sarah M. I'm an author of the book, and this is my book, How I Survived the Killing Fields. I'm going to, I will show you the picture on screen later on, but today we have a very good discussion. So, without taking any more time, I just want to get right into it. Well, the reason why we get on is to just um to have Rick share with you some of the amazing story of the people in the history. And in his book, he he wrote about 31 beautiful human being that made America great. But today, he will talk about somebody in the history, but not in his book. But Rick, as a historian, he loved to read story, especially history, the one that make us, you know, have a wonderful feeling about the person that he's going to share with us today. So, without any further, I'm going to introduce to you our presenter today. He is a 10 times nonfiction book author and an authority on American history. He spent most of his adult life living aboard boats and has traveled far and wide in the Americas. Let's welcome Rick Rhodes. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Today, I think it's fitting to talk about something to do with Pearl Harbor. It is, after all, 81 years after Pearl Harbor was bombed and drew America into World War II. And it was as Franklin Roosevelt says, a day that will live in infamy. That day, we lost over 2,000 men, I think 4 battleships, and a bunch of 164 aircraft. And Pearl Harbor was a mess. The admiral who ran Pearl Harbor at the time, his name was Husband Kimmel, and he was fired, as the Navy always does. They fire somebody, and the admiral that was going to replace him had been to Pearl Harbor before. His name was Chester Nimitz. He was a two-star admiral at a desk job in Washington, D.C. And he said to his wife, I'm commander of the Pacific Fleet. And she says, oh, honey, isn't that wonderful? That's what you always wanted. He said, yes, but the Pacific Fleet is now at the bottom of the ocean. So that was Chester Nimitz's. He's been to Pearl Harbor before. He set up the submarine base there. Uh, and when he came up there, one thing that I really liked about him is Kimmel was, of course, fired about firing people when they run a ship aground. And Nimitz said, "You're all staying. You're not getting fired. You guys messed up badly, and you're all staying." That's what really attracted me to him. I like that. He grew up in a Texas hill country, a little town called Fredericksburg, Texas, not too far from Austin. And he never knew his father. His mother was 6 months pregnant when his father died, but his influence was his grandfather, who was German, Nimitz, and he could speak German as a young child. And he wanted to get out of the Texas hill country. And one good way he thought to do it was go to the United States Military Academy. He went to San Antonio one time, not too far from Fredericksburg, Texas, and saw two West Point cadets. And he basically thought, "Man, that's for me. I want to do that." They're seeing the world, they're traveling, they're broadening their horizons, everything else. He goes to his congressman. You need a congressional appointment to get that job, and he And he said, I have no appointments for West Point. I said, but I do have one for the Naval Academy. He says, Naval Academy, what's that? I don't even know there was such an institution. So he studied hard, and he did get accepted to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. In I think it's class of nine. I think it was started in 1901, class of 1905. And at the Naval Academy, he studied hard. He finished seventh in his class, but he did do a little bit of partying there. One time at the Naval Academy, they used to drink beer illicitly. They weren't supposed to, and Nimitz was going out and getting the beer. And he went to the little store, and as another person standing in the store he saw him. He didn't think anything of it. The next day, next Monday, next class day, that guy happened to be his new navigation instructor. He saw Nimitz. He knew what Nimitz had done, but Nimitz learned he didn't report him. And Nimitz learned a bigger lesson by not being reported, that maybe having some leniency on some minor offense is not a bad idea. And anyway, Nimitz did very well at the Naval Academy. He finished seventh in his class. Uh, Soon after the Naval Academy, he was running a ship called the Decatur out of near Manila Bay, a small destroyer, and he ran it aground. Now that is a court-martial offense in the Navy. You run a ship aground, it's bad news. So Nimitz went before a court-martial board, and again, they said, man, you really messed up. They put a letter of reprimand. They did not court-martial him, and his naval career continued. And he did mess up, but there were some slightly extenuating circumstances. The tide charts were bad. The navigation charts weren't good. And he continued on in the Navy. Uh, After that, he was assigned to submarines. Now, in those days, pre-World War I, submarines were something of a cross between Julius Verne's novel and a humpback whale. Not a very glamorous thing. And he commanded 3 submarines. And submarines in those days were powered by gasoline. He thought this was a terrible thing, gasoline engines. And in ships and anything, even in small boats, they're dangerous. And he said diesel had just come on the scene. The Germans were big into diesels. And he basically said, let's get this. So let's move the submarine fleet into diesels and other ships. So they were doing that. They were quickly moving that stuff into diesels. And when he was doing that, one company saw he was the forefront of diesel engines, and they said, hey, I will pay you 6 times what you're getting in the Navy to work for us out of St. Louis, a diesel company. And he said, no, I'm staying with the Navy. I love the Navy. Navy's been good to me despite the court martials and everything else. And he turned down the figure for 6 times that. And then he was speaking a lot of times too, and he asked him for money, or he was offered money, and he never took it. He said, the Navy's been good to me. I won't take it. I won't take it. If you want to give it to someone, here's a charity or 2 I recommend. So it was that way. Him and his wife, Catherine, had 4 children. He said, we have enough money to pay our bills and send our 4 children to college. That's all we need. So he stayed in the Navy. And then in 1920, he went to Pearl Harbor for the first time. And since he was an expert at submarines as well as an expert at diesels, they asked him to build a naval base in Pearl Harbor. And he did that with a lot of pilfered supplies and stuff like that. So he was familiar with Pearl Harbor. And he said he basically built the small naval base they had at Pearl Harbor back in the 1920s. And then after that, he went to 1925. He started one of the first naval ROTC programs. That's Reserve Officer Training Corps for the Navy. And he went to school he was very much associated with the rest of his life, University of California, Berkeley. And he set up the Naval ROTC program there. And he got along real well with academia, with professors, and with students. And he always believed that he saw something that exists today is publish or perish for professors. He thought that was really ill-advised. He thought professors should become good professors, not always have to publish to stay ahead. And I can know that from a fact. In grad school, I had a few good professors that couldn't publish, and they got caxed, but they were great teachers. So, and then one time he was at a fraternity party. Some of the ROTC students were fraternity students, and an errant water balloon hit him. He was in his dress whites, soaking wet. He didn't think anything of it. He sat down with the frat boys and had dinner with them in his soaking wet uniform. So he was not a stuffed shirt and say, oh my God, I got wet. And one time a ROTC ROTC student came up to him, a naval ROTC student, said, he was a commander at this time. He said, Commander Nimitz, I know this is sentimental. I'd like to get graduated where I went to school. And Nimitz told him, don't worry about it, son. Sentimentality is part of a naval officer's job. So that's the way he felt about things. He's a very human person, very humble person, but very human. Uh, and when he was a taskmaster, he was never overbearing. He'd take ensigns now out on ships and teach them how to do it. And one time he himself was at the helm and he fouled up. He got his boat tangled up with the davits, which are hanging the lifeboats of another boat. And what's he do? He says, now, what did I do wrong, ensigns? So that's the type of guy he was. He used that as a learning experience. So he was a very down to earth, not anything but a stuffy guy. And then when World War II happened, one thing he did before World War II, he was working on how to fuel ships at sea, big ships at sea with tanker ships. And he got that system pretty well perfected. And that was huge when he finally took over the command at Pearl Harbor. And then when he took over Pearl Harbor, it was a mess. And everybody said, and he had a positive attitude. Like I said, all the guys behind Kimmel, you guys are staying here. You guys messed up badly, but don't let it happen again, and we'll move on. So he took the men he had, and he didn't say, you're fired, you're fired. He took them and helped them do an earlier job. Before long, there was the Battle of the Coral, and he had, like I said, not all of his fleet was at the bottom of the sea. Luckily, the aircraft carriers were out. But there's the Battle of the Coral Sea about 6 months after, maybe less than that, maybe 4 or 5 months after Pearl Harbor. That basically, both sides took a licking, and Nimitz, was a draw, and he stopped the Japanese from going further east in the South Pacific. And then a month later was the Battle of Midway. And that was in Midway. It's pretty far from the Coral Sea. And it's a long story, but I think they sunk 4 Japanese destroyers. It's a great story. It's about how last minute they spotted the aircraft carrier, and the battle was near Midway. It was never at Midway. And it was really a U.S. victory, and it really was a body blow to the Japanese. And that was the high watermark of their time in the Pacific. And then they're moving westward. And Japan had all these perimeters, and one of them was the Northern Mariana Islands, with Saipan, Guam, and Tinian. That's where my dad fought, incidentally. And that was like the outer Japanese perimeter, about 1,500 miles from Tokyo, or a lot of Japanese cities. That was very important because they built an air base on Guam and Tinian, and they could take those B-29 super fortresses and fly them to Tokyo and fly back and bomb the heck out of the Japanese, which is exactly what they started doing in 1944. So he was able to get Guam, Saipan, and Tinian, and they built airfields, and the 2 planes that took off to drop the atom bombs in August 1945 were based out of Tinian, one of the Northern Mariana Islands. So they got that, and then not long after that, in 1945, Nimitz attacks Iwo Jima early in 1945, and then really part of mainland Japan was Okinawa, and they were and the B-29 super fortresses were bombing the heck out of Tokyo, and the Japanese were having a really rough time. So that was Nimitz's move through the Pacific, so he did a great job. And then after the war was over, he was made chief of naval operations, and President then was Harry Truman, and he said, I'm really an Army guy. Truman was we talked about him several months ago, an Army artillery officer in World War I, so he had a bias toward the Army, but he used to vacation in Key West, Florida, right here, about 200, 300 miles away as a crow flies. And Nimitz had 3 submarines for him. He said, why don't you take a ride on these submarines, President Truman? And Truman did, and he goes, wow, these things are pretty neat. And then he said, by the way, I have an aircraft carrier over here next week. Why don't you see what an aircraft carrier does? And the two became very amicable, and Nimitz impressed Truman how important it was the aircraft carrier fleet, and Truman did have a new appreciation of aircraft carrier. And the other thing after World War II, Nimitz, as I said before, was at the forefront of diesel engines, the forefront of submarines. And then we had the nuclear age starting in 1945, and small nuclear reactors could be put inside submarines, and we could have nuclear submarines, and they could basically stay underwater indefinitely. And so Nimitz was always on the forefront of technology, pushing the nuclear capability of submarines. His big ally was Hyman Rickover, and Rickover was kind of a prickly guy, and Nimitz was the diplomat, and basically they were able to get nuclear submarines uh, rolling. So after the war, Nimitz did a lot of that, and he won the Pacific Theater. Oh, and they Oken. Oh, there's a battle after. Well, actually, it was the fall of 1944 was the Battle of Leyte Gulf, a huge, huge battle, and that basically broke the Japanese. But the Japanese started something new, was the kamikaze, and that Leyte Gulf battle was probably was the largest naval battle of World War II and possibly the largest naval battle in U.S. history. Well, after Nimitz got out, was World War II was over, and Europe surrendered. Germany surrendered 4 months before Japan did, and the admiral, the German, it was a submarine admiral that surrendered Germany, Karl Dönitz, and he was tried in Nuremberg because he was sinking ships in the North Atlantic, and he asked Nimitz to do an affidavit for him at the trial in Nuremberg, and Nimitz surely did. Said Dönitz didn't do anything the U.S. Navy did. We were sinking ships too. So he spoke in behalf of a German submarine commander who actually took the German surrender, and he got a much lighter sentence at Nuremberg thanks to Nimitz. And after Nimitz's career, the Navy, he retired in 1947, and they asked him to speak in many places, and he wouldn't do it. He didn't think it was proper for the face of the Navy during World War II, the Navy and the Marine Corps, and even everybody else in the Pacific who lost a lot of men, that he should be making money on the board of directors of this or the college president of this. He wouldn't do it because he didn't want to. He knew a lot of people lost relatives in that Pacific War, and he felt very that it wouldn't be right for him to basically make money, like a lot of other people did, a lot of other famous people doing things in the Pacific that other people off of his name. So he never did that, never took on the board of directors, and never did that after the war. He did speak out after McCarthyism in the early 1950s, the Red Scare, when many people in the government said you have to sign a loyalty oath, especially teachers and stuff. And Nimitz thought that was crazy. He said the good, it's going to insult the good professors, and the bad, and the people that are in the non, like 99.9% of them were, and the few that were, if there are any bad apples that are communists, they're going to lie about it anyway. He thought the whole idea was stupid, but he didn't do that. And then in so the Red Scare he spoke against, and then finally uh, he he. Uh, he died in 1966 of complications of pneumonia, and he did not want any fanfare extravaganza. He's buried in San Francisco, one city that I understand. I was talking to somebody yesterday. He's very well known in California and possibly even around Fredericksburg, Texas, where he's from. But him and four admirals are buried together with their wife in a very small, nondescript cemetery with no big headstones outside San Francisco. Nimitz, Lockwood, Kelly, and Spruance. Turner and Spruance. They're all buried with their wives, and he didn't want any fanfare, just a very, very simple thing. The Navy's always been good to him. And I'll close with what a president said about him. Gerald Ford, who was also a World War II Navy man, he said, he surrounded himself with good men and sought their advice, but made his own decisions. He was a keen strategist, and he never forgot that he was dealing with human beings. And he was always a humble guy. And I like him because he was a very humble guy and a very good leader. And he didn't scream and shout like a lot of them, like a Patton or even a Bull Halsey or a MacArthur. You never hear much out of Nimitz. He didn't blow his own horn, but he dang well won that war in the Pacific against the Japanese. A great, great human being. And I don't think we appreciate him as much as we should. Thank you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you, Rick. Yeah, that's a very impressive person. Um, So today is very appropriate. It's it's the memory.
Absolutely.
Yeah, today we remember Pearl Harbor Day. Uh, so I have some question for you. So for our audience, if you have any question for Rick, feel free to in the um, put your comment in. I can see your comment. So now, question for you, Rick.
Yes.
How did Chester Nimitz earlier naval career prepare him for success in the World War II?
Good Yeah, I mean, his little experience at West Point when he goofed up and was caught running a ship aground, he always was lenient and tolerant, and he was not like, I was in the army, and some bosses, some generals, some admirals, some colonels, and low ranks are yelling and screaming, and he didn't do that. He didn't pound his chest. So he was given a few breaks as a young officer, and he in turn imparted those to other people. And I mean, the greatest thing he did was at Pearl Harbor. He didn't fire anybody. So yes, his early experience, leniency. It was not a horse's ass when it came to a lot of stuff, like a lot of other, high-ranking admirals might have been.
Oh, okay. So Susan, say hello. Susan Norman. Thank you, Susan, for your comment. So, what did you especially like about Chester Nimitz? I keep saying Minute. Nimitz. So, what did you especially like about him?
Well, he was humble. He was a humble man. He wasn't, he didn't do this "you're fired" stuff. He didn't say "I'm the greatest." He learned. He went wherever they took him, and he stayed. He did his job with humility. And he was only a two-star admiral when the war started, and he ended up with 5 stars. That happens a lot. It's not unusual in a wartime. But he was a humble man and didn't. You never heard Nimitz did this. Bull Halsey did this. MacArthur did this. But Nimitz was doing all the stuff behind the scene, and he did a lot through other people and gave them a lot of credit. And he was a humble man.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you for your answer. So, what lesson can we draw today from Admiral Chester Nimitz's life?
Well, and he basically, as far as any more so than MacArthur. Now you might get some arguments on that. General Douglas MacArthur, the Army, won the war in the Pacific. MacArthur will say, "Well, I shall return," and all this stuff. But what limits Nimitz was quiet behind the scenes, but he did a lot through other people by not using is not the right word, but he was humble, as Gerald Ford said. He understood people, and he did not jump down their throat, and he managed in a very managerial way, not an authoritarian way. And I think that's very important today, where everybody's saying like you got to do it my way or the highway. Nimitz had his way, but he didn't shove it down people's throat. He gave people credit, and he did it with humility. Humility, I guess, would be the big thing, Sarah.
Mm, okay, so this is what Susan said. My story. All right. So let's see if we have any question from our audience. Friends, while you're watching, if you have any question, please let us know. Put in the chat. Put in the comment. We can see your question. So Keith said, "Nice story."
I think I know him.
Same with Susan. All right. Okay, I will show the picture of the person that you are talking about.
Please.
Okay, so here he is in his,
Courtesy of the National Portrait Gallery.
yeah, he's in uniform and look like a look like he's in his late 50 at that point, at that time to take the picture. So very nice. So I'm going to show Rick's book. Um, the topic that he talked today is not part of the book, but Rick's book is right here. They made America great. They made America great, and I I strongly recommend it. You will enjoy. He he wrote about 31 people that made America great. They are all good story. I enjoy reading them. Oh, I appreciate you, Rick, for digging out all the good, the wonderful story in the past. So for anyone that now that don't know me, I'll show you my book. I wrote only one book. Rick wrote 10 books. So that's the difference. I'm a newbie. But this is my book. It's called How I Survived the Killing Fields. And that's my own personal journey. So if you like to follow my story, you can go to my website. Let me put up my banner. This is my banner. And my website is sarahim.com. sarahim.com. And I'm going to put Rick's banner up so you can see the full picture. So you can go to his website, rickrhodes.com, and you can find that book, the history book. All right. Well, we make in good time. Thank you, everyone, for watching, for your comment, for your encouragement. So Rick just came back from the hospital from seeing the doctor, and he had a hard time walking, but he committed to be here with us today. So I appreciate you're watching us. So it means a lot to Rick that he commit to his time to be here with you, preparing the speech and telling the good story. I love to hear the good story.
And maybe next time we'll talk about a birthday girl, Clara Barton, at Christmas.
Yeah. So let's see. See, I'll put my website up or Rick's website. See. My website, if you want to find my book, is right here. crm.com/book. You will find my book there. And both Rick and I, we are member of Bay Area Professional Writers Guild. So that's why we know each other. And the guild is they have been as an organization for many years, many decades, about 4 decades, right? Maybe 40 years or so.
Probably three decades.
Yeah,
Norman was a past president long ago.
yeah. So I put up this website, Bay Area Professional Writers Guild, bapwg.org. That's the organization. If you are interested in learning about writing a book or any kind of information that are related to writing, that's a good organization to participate in. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. And let's see, we have another comment coming. Comment. Oh, the comment. Susan said, appreciate you, Rick.
Thank you.
So this is Susan's comment. Appreciate you. All right. Any more questions? Please feel free to put in the chat, in the comment. We can see your comment. So Susan said thanks for the card and letter too. This is a comment from Suzanne. Suzanne is a vice president of Bay Area Professional Writers Guild, and we appreciate you, Susan. Thank you for watching and sharing your comments. Okay, it's 4:30. I promised Rick that we would not take any more than 30 minutes. So he can go and rest and lay down. Put his leg arm his
Yeah.
he
Thank you.
needs that today. Very bad. Uh, well, goodbye everyone. So
Thank you.
next time we will be on the 21st. Are you still up to do it, Rick?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll talk about her birthday was on Christmas Day. Clara Barton, founder of Red Cross.
Awesome. So our next show will be on the 21st. It's 2 weeks from today. So thank you, everyone. You have a
Thank you.
wonderful evening, and thank you, Rick, for being here for sharing the good story. And I hope your knees feel better. You can walk better tomorrow. So thank you. So I'm going offline now.
Thank you.